to it. Arcus! Breakfast! Arcus's eyes flung open at the call for breakfast. He threw the blankets of his bed off and swung his feet out to plant against the hard wood flooring. He bare feet loudly, thudding out of his room and down the stairs towards the kitchens where he would meet the rest of his family. Once he reached the bottom of the stairway, something inside of him went cold and ailed his pursuit. He slowly came to a halt as he was passing the sitting room to his left. He did not look at the closed double doors of the room, for something told him not to look, never to look. He paused in front of the doors, his eyes frozen to the floor. His little hands were balled up in fists, and his lips were pulled back in a grimace. He was suddenly brought out of his staring when a voice he did not recognize called out to him once more. Arcus, come down and eat your breakfast before your sisters get to it. Arcus remembered who the voice belonged to now, and it was not his father's. He remembered everything from the night prior, and would not move from his spot in front of the sitting room where his parents loved to sit. Despite his body's wish not to look, Arcus was spurred to do so. He slowly reached for the small handles of the double doors, but just before he could get a grasp, he heard the voice of his uncle boom out once more. Arcus, come and get your breakfast. I won't say it again. This time there was firmness to the tone that held no fairness of kindness whatsoever. This moved Arcus away from the sitting room. He backed away and slowly headed towards the kitchens with his head down. As he rounded the corner towards the kitchen, he peered up to see all of his sisters seated at the table already. The baby twins were not in the arms of their mother, but that of yet another stranger. She was a plump-looking Volcari who looked older in the face. She had a uniform akin to a maid and a certain look of kindness on her face as she welcomed Arcus to the table. Arcus said nothing as he pulled up his chair and sat down, not even when Vivian greeted him like she always did. Hi, Arcus! Good morning! Arcus said nothing but continued to stare at the table in front of him. Not because he was used to ignoring Vivian, but because something was awfully wrong with this picture painted for him, and he would not take it lying down. But what could he do? He mulled over his thoughts, eyes trained on the white cloth of their dining table. He then felt a kick to his shins that broke his concentration. His eyes snapped up to Vivian, who gave him a wide smile. The large gap where her front teeth were to grow back in gave enough room for her to stick out her tongue at him. He sorely glared at his half-sister, but said nothing. There was bigger problems to deal with, starting with the Min posing as their father. He looked over to Mordecai, whose back was turned to him as he was cooking bacon in the frying pan. If looks could kill, Arcus would have become a murderer at a very young age. His blue, stark eyes bore into the Min that was his uncle and thought of nefarious ideas, thoughts that no little boy should harbour. But this intrusion on his father's place quickly taught Arcus the meaning of hate. As if he could feel the young lag staring him down, Mordecai turned his head to look at Arcus and beamed at him before turning fully to face him. Ah! There you are. I was beginning to wonder if I'd have to fetch you out of bed, lad. Did you sleep okay? Swell, Arcus mumbled, his eyes locked on those red ones. For a moment, there was a silence between he and his uncle, and it was that moment that Arcus understood why such silence was deadly. He found himself looking away from the monster that was his uncle and back to the clothed table. Mordecai seemed pleased by this and released a bolstering laugh. Don't look so sour, Arcus. I'm not here to hurt you. I suppose, however, you're wondering why your father isn't here cooking breakfast instead. Arcus looked up, hopeful, but the expression on Mordecai's sullen face spoke volumes to him, telling him all he needed to know before he would be fed. Your father and mother have both fallen very ill, Arcus. I'm not sure exactly what caused it, but it seems severe. Too severe to move them, so they remain in the sitting room. But fear not, young nephew, I shall be taking good care of them. You have nothing to worry about. Arcus wished that he could believe that. This monster that was welcomed into their home, he somehow managed to win the hearts of his family. Not even Vivian could sense that things were array as she busily stuffed her face with food. Amina was far too young to understand, but he felt Vivian would at least pick up that this monster was no boon to their family. He looked around the table, watching his sisters carry along like nothing had happened, like their parents were not in peril danger, that this monster might have been a threat to their very lives. There he saw a false image of his family. Twin sisters were being held and fed by someone he did not know, while an impostor had taken the place of his father, a place that no one should ever dare to take, let alone pretend to do so. The audacity of this stranger bringing such a mess into his home boiled Arcus's blood. He visibly shook with searing inner rage, so much so that his fists shook and his teeth clenched with jaws flexing. He could not hold his anger in any longer and sought an outlet, but before he could even act, Mordecai was next to him. He placed a hand on the boy's shaken fist, immediately stilling the boykin's rage, whom was replaced with startled confusion. How did he get to stand beside him so fast? He did not see the Min move, let alone heard him, yet he stood beside him with that same sicking smiling on his bearded face. Now, Arcus, it will all be all right. Just you mind you, boy, and let Uncle Mordecai take care of the rest, yes? Arcus looked up at Mordecai the same way he did that night, and was instilled with the same fear. A boy looking up into a monster with those red eyes gleaming into him. Arcus swallowed and nodded his head, saying nothing more. When he was presented with his breakfast, the sight and smell caused him to feel ill in the stomach, but he would eat nonetheless. He had no choice. As he was eating, his uncle mentioned that he would have to begin training whenever he was finished with breakfast. This confused Arcus, but he did not question the Min. It was something that his father once mentioned to him, but with the birth of his twin sisters, that was thrown out of the window. The kind of training that involved combat, so he knew what was in store for him, and nothing horrible, he hoped. So for weeks, Arcus trained with Mordecai. He was taught how to hold and wield a sword, and the techniques that the Zuxier kin of Zuxin were known to teach their pupils. It was grueling and painful, as Mordecai was very strict mentor. Arcus was often left with cuts and bruises during each session, and afterwards his body was torn and battered, leaving him so sore that he could not get up the next day, but he had to endure. He had to be strong not only for himself, but for his family as well. So for years he did what he was told by Mordecai, and once he became 11 years old, he was pronounced to be a well-groomed swordsman. But his training with the monster was not over, and the planning for its demise began. For his 11th birthday, he was shown how to fly. Although he bore wings, much like all Volcari, he did not know how to use them, for they were much too small growing up. Now that he was older, his wings were as well, spanning outward, to be just as wide as he was tall. He grew up to be quite the tall young lad, standing at the height of 5'2", with the athletic build of an active boy. His navy blue hair also grew out from its shaven state to that of the length long enough to be put in a short ponytail style. Yes, he grew into a well-groomed lad with the maturity of someone far older than 11. He had mastered the etiquettes that his parents taught, as well as the etiquettes of sportsmanship, manners, language, education, and general knowledge. Mordecai made it perfectly clear from day one of training that he was to be a well-rounded boy growing up, and he became just that, but he never forgot his parents, not even once. As he was practicing his flying, he became seasoned enough to be able to fly clear over the massive house that was the House of Knighthood, and as he was passing over, he noticed the family's crest posted up as a weather rod. The steel-made raven seemed to be looking straight at Arcus as he flew over it, and that was when Arcus found the courage to look where he feared the most, to look where the truth was. One day, before he would begin his day's worth of training with Mordecai, Arcus slipped out of bed and down the stairs. He tiptoed to where the sitting room was and stood before it. It took him some time of gathering his courage before he would reach for the handles of the double doors and open them up. He slowly parted the doors open and looked inside the room. From what he could see was total darkness, but allowing his eyes to adjust to the room, he found the hand resting on the armchair. It was as if it never moved. Before Arcus could feel relief and joy, something told him that something was amiss. He moved in closer to the armchair. His eyes never left the hand resting there. There was something missing from it, the family heirloom ring. The eye of the raven, they called it. The blue gem that once sparkled under the loving gaze of the Luna was gone. Seeing this jumped Arcus's heart, but before he would leap to any conclusions, he had to see for himself. He had to see the truth that he had been hiding ever since he was 7. The truth that beckoned him to not look whenever he passed the sitting room coming down the stairs from his room. Every time he would pause before the room. Day by day it became a little easier to ignore and never ail in his footsteps, but this day he would ignore it no longer. He couldn't. For the sake of his family, he had to know. He rounded the chair to see the face of his father. What he saw shook him to his core. The once virile and handsome helm of the knighthood had been reduced to a withering corpse, his skin pale and aged from years of death. His demigod blood kept him from succumbing to skin decay, but it did not save him from becoming a husk of a being. This sight nearly collapsed Arcus, his legs begging to buckle underneath him. What did him in was the sight of his mother, whom also was reduced to a corpse. It seemed that whatever happened to them left no visible wounds, painting a picture of horror as the baron and baroness of his life were nothing more than mere props of poison. Arcus broke down into tears. He wept like a little boy should have, like the little boy he once was so long ago. He wept and he cried, and he bawled and he screamed. Fists of fury crashed down on the hardwood floor, soaked in his dismay. The puddle of years pooled under his bowed head. The sting of pain in his eyes was nothing compared to the sting of loss. He could hold it back no longer, and his body knew so. Combined with the hardship of training, it gave out and fell to the ground. He curled himself into a bawling ball, hugging his knees and crying out for his parents. He couldn't believe, but he had to, for it was the truth. What or whom that had told him to not look was the very spirit of his parents, wishing him not to endure such a traumatic scene. They tried to salvage what little boyhood he'd have left, but he knew, he always knew. Since the very first day they were poisoned and killed by his uncle. Since the day he realized the monster that was Mordecai. He knew. But he could do nothing as a boy, but the boy that he once was died a long time ago. Trained and hardened, he would step out of the sitting room as a min.